Hey, there we go. Welcome back to another Virtual Dev Intersection. My name is Jeff Fritz, and I'm being joined by it was a stormtrooper. That's what it was.
That's a clone trooper.
A clone trooper. Oh my goodness. Uh, today I'm being joined by that's not Dan Wahlin. No, that's John Papa. Hello. Good to see you, sir.
How's it going today?
Oh my gosh. I've been writing so much C# recently that my JavaScript skills are slacking. They're fading away on me because I've been so C# focused. I've been so excited about .NET Core that I need to spend some time learning about Angular, about Vue. Do you know anybody who can help with that?
No, I was hoping you were going to teach me today.
So, of course, you've got a tremendous a pair of workshops at the show coming up, at the Dev Intersection show coming up in Vegas here in November. You've got a day of Angular and a day of Vue.
Yes, correct. We'll be talking about, I think the Vue workshop is getting started from basically 0 to 60, whatever we called it. But in a day, we're going to teach you about 80% of what you need to know to be a successful Vue developer. And then the second day, I believe, is the Angular architecture workshop, which is more like, okay, you know Angular, but how do you take it to the next level? And Dan and I have a lot of good stories that we'll be sharing in both those workshops.
And there's something to be said for hearing those anecdotes, those stories from folks who've been through the process, who have built the applications, know the trouble points that you're going to run into and how to avoid them.
We like to think so. It's definitely, I like to talk about, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And the things that you learn throughout what you build are very important to remember, because making mistakes is part of life. And I code things wrong a lot. But what I do is I try to remember what I did. I take notes, I try to track it, and then afterwards just share that information with myself and then with other people. Very
cool. Now, there's a lot that you cover in the full day with Vue, right? If I'm, as somebody who, I haven't touched a JavaScript framework since Angular 2. That's how out of it I am, okay?
Okay.
Why would I choose Vue over Angular?
This is a conversation I think I have about 7 times a day, to be honest with you. And you could replace Vue, Angular, Stencil, Svelte, Ember, React, the Jeff Fritz framework,
I don't have that. That's not me.
Yeah, you can really go down a lot of roads here. So what I like to tell people is first, and I think I just wrote this answer like literally 5 minutes ago to somebody. So let me bring that up for a second.
Okay.
So what I wrote to somebody was, okay, they asked, should I be using Vue or React at this point, or should I stick with Angular, which I have some knowledge of? And I said, based on that information, you should pick whatever you're comfortable with, your team's comfortable with, your company's comfortable with, and what's best for your customer.
Sure.
When you look at all 4 of those angles, I think things really do solidify. And yes, it depends, but it does. I mean, if you know nothing about Vue, but you know Angular, and your team also knows Angular, then no, don't go down the Vue road. I mean, Vue, React, and Angular, they're all the same thing in the end. It's just how you build things. So it really depends how you want to go down that road. For me, if you're starting from scratch, or you're trying to solve a problem with a new team, or your team's coming from .NET, like much of your audience and yourself, and you want to into JavaScript, I think that's a different story of, I don't really know any of these very well. Which one do you think is the easiest one for me to get started with and won't leave me dropped off a cliff? In that case, I kind of feel like Vue is a good answer there.
Okay. So, I mean, as somebody who hasn't used Vue, right, what are the advantages? What makes Vue so palatable for new developers?
Well, I think it gets like this. I try to forget about the technology and think more about the problems we're solving, the challenges we have. So if you're the kind of person who feels like you want a guided path, where you don't want to, every time you're trying to do something, you're like, oh, well, there's 7 ways to do it. Which one should I pick? Let me go spend 7 hours on Google to figure out what I'm doing and get 7 different answers. And half of them are like, trolling me.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So some people just want a guided path. Like, I just got to get my job done. My boss is telling me I got to get this done. And she's like, it's got to be done by this date.
You got to be productive.
Yeah. If you're that kind of person, you want a guided path.
Sure.
Angular feels really good. If you're the kind of person who's like, you know what, I'm kind of a cowboy, cowgirl programmer, and there's times I'm like this, and that's not a negative thing. It's you know what, I got a little time in this project, but I might want to use this router or that router or make my own router or do it a different way. I feel like I can do it better. React really appeals because it's more flexible in that sense. It's less guided.
Okay.
So where Vue falls in, the question comes in if you're not on one extreme or the other. I kind of feel like, my personal opinion, Vue falls in the middle really nicely.
Interesting. Okay.
A little bit guided, a little bit more flexible than Angular, a little bit more guided than React. And the big key is this: you can literally start using Vue in less than 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Sold. All right.
5 minutes is nice.
5 minutes is great.
Yes.
I'm going to pivot over here to the chat room. Snoopaloopy is saying, yes, Snoopaloopy is saying, no love for Knockout JS. I think Knockout's just a little bit removed here from the conversation, John. You're going back about 10 years for Knockout, aren't you?
Almost. Yeah, and I wrote some courses on Knockout, and it's still highly used, quite frankly, and so is Jquery and Backbone and stuff like that. But Knockout really is just the data binding part of the framework. Just like lit HTML, another term people may not know, but I wrote an article on this recently, is really just the rendering side. It's a framework that just does rendering. Okay. So if you just want one piece of a total architecture, Knockout's great for data binding. No problem with it. Lit HTML is great for rendering. Go for it.
Yeah. React feels messy, says Rambling Geek. Well, if you do have that amount of flexibility, right? I mean, Uncle Ben from Spider-Man said, right, with great power comes great responsibility, right?
If you want, I can show you a same app that was written in React, Vue, and Angular.
Oh my gosh, that'd be tremendous. Let me switch over there to your desktop so we can take a look.
And guess what? It's all hosted on Azure. Brought to you by
Microsoft Azure. All right, let's take a look. There's your screen.
Find my URLs. We'll pop this up there.
There we go.
Let's go like this. There's a Vue app.
Okay.
And there is, let's just copy the URL. You can all go here, by the way. It's papaheroes-vue or React, azurewebsites.net. And we'll drag another one down towards the bottom. We'll copy this, come over here, and we'll go to Angular. I need a fourth one just so I can do it that way. Oh, you know what? I do have a fourth one. Where is it? We were just looking at it. Boom, Vanilla.js.
Wow. Okay.
So the vanilla one isn't. It's not the exact same app, but it's similar. They're all Tour of Heroes. It's just a model that I use where everybody's a hero.
Sure.
You got heroes and you got villains, and here's a list of things. You can edit each one of those if you want. I can edit Ivar over here and do Lagertha down there. The React one is red. Is blue. The Angular one's red, and the Vue one is green. It's what their core colors are, just so I can visually see them.
Sure.
The code on the screen. Let's see if I can do this there. There's the. Am I looking at the right one? Let me make sure I am. Yes. There's that one. There's that one. Let's open up another VS Code, and we'll pop it open.
The VS Code is strong with this one. Wow.
Yes. So red, Angular, blue, React, green, Vue.
Okay.
And just to kind of get a sense of this, if we go look at, for example, it's the Angular one. We'll go to Angular TypeScript component. This is just the code.
Okay.
There's where the component begins. If we go over here to a heroes component, I think that's it there. Yep. And I'll even get rid of the, oops, wrong one. Get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. And come down here. And there is the heroes view.
Okay.
Just trying to get rid of stuff on the screen. So here we've got a heroes component up in Angular in the upper left.
Okay.
And you can see it's using TypeScript. That's what Angular does. A couple differences are if I want to go talk to get heroes data in Angular, I inject a service to go get that because it's got dependency injection, which a lot of .NET people would be very familiar with, right?
Sure. .NET, Java folks as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in React, there's no service. There's no injector. I am using a class in this case. I didn't have to. You can write a component with a pure function or a class. And actually in this app, I did it with both just because I could. And then down here, I've got where's my get? There's my render function, which you can see here, you're embedding your HTML inside of a JavaScript function, which is called JSX.
Okay.
That's how you render the template.
That feels a little bit like crossing the streams there. As somebody who, right, is always interested in, I'm interested in single responsibility principle. That feels like I'm putting a little bit of my view inside of my controller, right? To think MVC like.
I have thoughts on that. Let's get to that, but hold that for a moment until we look at the view one.
Sure.
Then the view one down in the bottom right it's using JavaScript. Version 3 of Vue, you can use TypeScript better. You can do it in version 2, but I recommend JavaScript and Vue 2. So down here, it's literally an object literal. And you just got a property for that's the name of the component. This is all the data that you're going to bind on the component. And then you'll see there's a function that goes off and gets my heroes, which actually calls into another service to get it. So in the end, the big thing that's the same is you see the template in Vue is actually in the same file as your JavaScript.
Yeah.
So you can see template and script. It's a .vue file. There's an extension inside of VS Code called Vetur, V-E-T-U-R, which I believe Pine Wu creates. He's on the part of the VS Code team who does Vue. And what it allows you to do is VS Code sees a .vue file and it knows, okay, there's template and there's script and it's all on one page. They call that a single file component. An SFC.
That makes sense. Okay.
And this has a point when we get to it as well. The React file, in my mind, is also a SFC, although they don't call it this. It's a single file component because in this file, I happen to have chosen to put one component, heroes.
Right.
And it's also combining the template.
Because it has that JSX there. Yeah.
One file.
Okay.
In Angular, there isn't in this one. It's not a single file component. In this case, the HTML template is over here on the right in a different file, and then the code is on the left. So this gets you to what you were saying, the single responsibility. But here's the catch, Jeff.
Yeah.
For years, I love single responsibility. It's my favorite principle.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
okay,
I think I lied to myself for a long time. Single responsibility here, does that really mean that the HTML and JavaScript has to be in separate files? Or does it really mean that the thing I'm looking at really only should have one responsibility? It really should only be doing one thing.
Oh, I see where you're going.
So to me, I'm constantly flipping between the TypeScript and the HTML and back and forth and back and forth.
Right, and effectively, you're always looking at this split screen for here's your Angular template and here's your file. It might as well be one screen.
Now, what if I did this?
Yeah.
You can actually do that. It's valid syntax. Now I have HTML inside of my Angular template and my TypeScript. Now, people might go, well, it's going to get really long. Well, here's the thing. When you look at a file, everybody's got a number in their head, Jeff, right, of how long a file is and when it's too big.
Yeah. Yeah.
Might be 100 lines for you, might be 200. Some people it might be 7,000.
Oh my gosh. Don't do that.
No.
Don't do that.
But here, if it gets too long, whatever your number is, it's probably a good sign that either your code or your HTML probably should be split up anyway.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
And here you can see I'm actually calling other templates here. I'm calling my hero details, my hero list are actually in other places. So is my modal dialog. But the template, if I don't want to look at it, all I got to do is come up here to component, collapse it, and I can look at it.
Yeah.
Same thing in Vue.
Let the editor help you.
That's my words of wisdom today is that, you know what? Something I've learned from Vue and React that I brought back to Angular is I really actually prefer to have all the code for a single component in one file and not spread out across HTML and TypeScript.
You know what? I can definitely buy that. The bouncing around between files, you burn out that tab key, Control Tab, Alt Tab, Control Tab, flipping around. Then we've had similar discussions, and I'm gonna hint at where I'm going to here. We've had similar discussions as we've been learning the Blazor framework. Do I want to put all my C# code behind in some sort of a model file? Or in all the samples for Blazor, they're in line in a code block at the bottom. We're running into the exact same question that you're showing here. Do we put our code right next to our markup? It's interesting.
It is, and I'll be very honest. I can't find anybody else in the Angular space who feels the way I do right now about this. But okay. I really, really do like this. And me, I've never been one to shy away from having an opinion. So I feel more productive with all my code in one file. And it's something I've learned from Vue and React that I feel better about. In fact, I put the word feel inside your chat because a lot of your comments down here, folks, are saying React feels easier than Angular, or Vue feels better to me, or think about that word feel. You asked me, how do you choose?
Yeah.
I keep telling people, choose what feels best, because when you ask people why they really do something, somebody might start going down the path of this one's more performant and this one does X and this one does Y, but you know what? That's a lie.
Okay.
In JavaScript, they all do the same thing, and we're kidding ourselves by saying this one's better than the other. You don't pick a technology because it's better. Not in this space. You pick one because you like it better. Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You don't make fun of me because I do JavaScript. I don't make fun of you because you do core.
Sure.
Right?
Right. We're all just trying to get stuff done.
Yeah. So do what feels best to you, and have a Coke and a smile and pass it on.
Absolutely. But we can make fun of the PHP folks. Can we do that at least? Can we agree on
no. Jeff.
I try. All right. Look, and I'm gaining an appreciation for folks that are doing Python, right? And how can we integrate with folks that are doing some interesting stuff with Python?
Yeah.
And certainly, as I go through and I do more work with the Twitch platform, there's a lot of Node that happens behind the scenes, and you need to get a little bit more of an understanding of Node in order to integrate and build extensions, and really, the folks you see from Twitch, they promote and they share their examples, and it's typically React. Okay, but I use technology X. I'm a Python developer. I'm a PHP developer. Then you run into this. Well, I need to kind of convert and understand the two.
Yep.
So
it is complicated to get through a lot of it. And if you really want to throw another monkey into the wrench into the works.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at analogies.
It's a thing, words.
Here's an example of not using any framework down here in the bottom left. And let's just make it, let's use Peacock and just color code it. So yellow will be JavaScript.
Okay, I love the colorization that we're seeing for the 4 Visual Studio codes here. That does make it clear.
And I do apologize to those who are have accessibility and vision impaired, but bottom left, JavaScript, right? And it's actually using TypeScript. Some people have given me garbage over why using TypeScript. Well, because with TypeScript, before Jeff and I got on, we saw a bug in my code, and I was trying to fix it. Because I had this type right here called template result array on here, and I accidentally had not had this return statement down here in line 89. All of a sudden, look what's happening in my code.
Immediately.
I'm seeing all these issues and mistakes, and then up here we saw this red thing that says, hey, type void is not assignable to the function of type result. If I was not using TypeScript, this bug never would have appeared, and Jeff and I'd be sitting here with you all going, what is going on?
You'd be compiling, you'd be running through your linter. Hey, where's it seeing this error? Trying to look in the browser, what's popping out. Yeah.
And I'm not using classes or anything else in here. I'm literally just using functions and regular JavaScript. The only TypeScript I'm doing is there's a couple places I'm like, you know what? I want to make sure this is actually an array of the thing that I think it is. Because sometimes you do all the hard work. Like this was the hard part of this function, which I'll explain in a minute. The return statement was the easy part, and that's the one you forget sometimes,
Yeah. Let me take a look. There's a couple of comments here, a couple of questions I want to make sure we get to. Stroth J says, does Angular support type checking in templates? I wasn't able to get a clear answer, but this kind of fits in nicely with you've got type checking out of the TypeScript, but inside the template.
Yeah, let's find out. So first of all, honestly, I've never tried this here. So first time in an embedded template
it's good to
in
explore. let's tinker. Let's see how John Papa figures this out.
Let's blow them all up. I just zoomed in slightly.
Sure.
And up here inside of our template, in inline templates, let's go to heroes. This should be, it's a variable called heroes. Yeah, I'm guessing we're not going to get it. Like if I typed in foo, it should know that there's no such thing as foo. Yep.
Okay.
There's a model somewhere in my object called foo. But let's say I put in selected. That's a thing, but it's not an array, and it doesn't know. So it is here. Selected is the selected hero, whereas heroes is an array. It's not doing a type check in this particular case. Let's try it the way we had it originally, Jeff.
With it as an external file.
Yeah, because that's usually what people do in Angular. Boom, 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 and we'll do. By the way, in VS Code, whenever you have to go somewhere, the way I like to tell you is you have to go somewhere to another file, for example, and it's the last file you're at. Anytime you have to go, Command PP. Yes, I'm a father of 4, and I have terrible dad jokes.
Yeah.
Command PP takes you to the last file you're in.
I have a sad tuba sound effect. Don't make me use it.
So notice in here in the template, I typed in selected again, and it still doesn't know. It knows the heroes is a property of the component, and it knows selected is a valid model, but it doesn't know that they don't match. So no, not that I can see. There might be an extension I don't know of, but sorry, Stroth J.
Yeah, but good question. And there you go. We tested it out, tried it here. Janescu says it looks like you made coloring choices in your Visual Studio Code so that it looks like the Microsoft logo.
That was completely unintentional.
Coincidence? Yeah.
These are actually the colors using the brands of React, Angular, and Vue. So
we can place them in different places to make it whatever color.
Sure. We can even move them around like that. Here, let's move Vue up there. We'll put Angular down here. Here we go.
Yeah, there you go. Look, Angular, it's right here. Let's see here. The compiler only checks the TS file, says recursive chat. Says recursive chat. In chat. Says recursive chat.
Yeah, and I imagine that somebody like Mingo Kachev, who works in the Angular team, might have some amazing extension or tool that could do this for you, because quite frankly, I never put anything past him. The guy is amazing. He's actually the author, I think, of the original Angular style guide.
Okay.
He started one before Todd Motto or I ever did.
So that style guide has really gotten some legs and is a tremendous resource for folks. Can you talk a little bit about what your thinking was that led into, hey, we should have a style guide for this?
Sure. So the Angular style guide is basically John Papa's opinion on here's how I write Angular. And what I did is I'm very much my father says I'll never get here. I'm the kind of guy who says, I want to make everybody happy. And he says, that's why you will die an unhappy man. So,
Oh my gosh.
So what I try to do is to say, okay, how do I program? Because I do a lot of work in not my current role, but in my previous roles of guiding teams to build architectures. How do you guide hundreds or thousands of developers down the same path? Well, tooling, automation. But before you can get there, you have to have rules or guidelines.
Okay.
So what I did is I wrote down all the guidelines for all the ways I program Angular, and I had one basic rule about the whole thing. Everything had to be listed as here's what you do and here's why you do it. And the reason the why had to be there, if the why was ever just because, I didn't include it. I had to have a reason. It doesn't mean I was right, but it meant I do this because this means this to me and it helps me here. And to me, that made it more approachable for people to use. And at one point, it was the 20th most starred GitHub on repo.
Nice.
But what I like about it is it says, look, this is what I do. Here's why I do it. And I would get people coming up to me at conferences, Jeff, saying, I love your style guide. It's amazing. And I hate to tell you, but we forked it and changed these rules because we just didn't agree with those. I'm like, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. That's great.
Yeah, right. I feel like as a global starting point.
Yes.
That's a good, and I spent a lot of time reading through that style guide and learning, and this is a good way to put pieces together. But for an organization to say, you know what, here's our preference, putting the template in the same file instead of referencing it as an external URL. Brilliant. There's a perfect example of this is the way my organization wants to do this.
Yeah, it's really important for your organization or your team, or even if it's just you, to have some kind of guidelines for this is how I do things.
Yeah.
And yeah, they evolve, but just in general role in life, if I can't explain why, I try to avoid things.
Mm.
And an okay answer for why for your own coding is it's just the way I like it. That's okay,
Sure. I don't know isn't the best answer for some of these things. Go research and figure out why and make an informed decision maybe.
Yeah, a lot of that is, and I'll give you another why on here. If you go to, let's look at the Vue one, and let's look at the Angular one side by side.
Okay.
And we'll open up the Explorers.
I'm going to turn off our cameras here for just a second so folks can see all of that.
Okay, and I will get the screen stopped to flickering. I'll zoom in a little. All right, looks like people can see it.
Yep, there we go. And I'll come to your question. I watch Qt streamers in just a minute here.
Cool. And just to get an idea, like we're looking at the file structures. Here's one of the differences. This is a very, very small app. In the app on the left, there's my views. There are 3 files in the heroes folder. 3 different components. 3 files in the villains folder. If I go into the villains over here, I have 5 folders and files in the villains folder. And then I have 2 files in each of these folders. So basically, every component in Angular has a TypeScript file, an HTML file, an optional CSS or Sass file, and an optional test file. We'll leave the tests out of this, but you could have 3 files for every component, which is one of the reasons with Angular you end up with a lot more stuff. Arguably, it's easier to find. Depends on what you want. But let's say you had 100 components and you have 3 files per component. That's 300 files and then a bunch of folders to organize them. In Vue, I have 1 file per component or React. Now, it's not an Angular versus Vue thing again. It's more just what if that's what really led me down the road of what if I put the template inside of TypeScript?
Yeah. Simplify.
So this is, again, just it's a way to define why. Why does John Papa like this? This is why. May not be right for you, but it's the way I roll.
Sure. Now, and Qt Streamers asks, well, which one of those 3 frameworks do you prefer currently?
It depends, and I'll give you the answer of how I would answer this. If I was told I have a budget and I have to get something done, and me personally right now, because I don't know what team I'm working with, if I had to get something done in a budget and it was a short timeline, I have been through all the avenues of Angular back and forth again. Tight timeline, I'm building it with Angular because I have made it do tricks and jump in the air. Comfort level super high. If I had a little bit more time and a little bit more leeway, I would love to try it with Vue or React. I would probably lean towards Vue just because it appeals to me a little bit more than React does personally.
Okay.
But there are things in Vue I have not done that I have absolutely done in Angular, like some really complex things,
Sure. Now, I mean, there's something. Let me reel that back in. That question I was going to ask. Yeah, there's something to be said, right? And I mentioned a little bit earlier that I've been doing some integration with the Twitch platform, and that's something that I'm exploring and learning. But sometimes you'll run into integrations with folks where they kind of. Right, they don't just suggest, but they kind of mandate you need to use this framework and this set of tools. How do you feel about folks that try to impose their framework preference like that?
I've never been somebody to do that. Let me put it this way: when somebody tells you what to do, what's your first reaction? Have you ever tried telling your kid, brother, sister, mother, or father what to do?
Oh dear Lord! Come on now. Come on now. I've got 2 daughters that are in their teens, and I am in a world of hurt already as the father, okay?
If you want people to go down a certain direction, because we all want to motivate or influence people, the best way to do that is to find out and listen to them, see what they're doing, what are their concerns and challenges, and figure out how can what you are trying to do fit into their solution. And most importantly, if it doesn't, leave it alone.
That's not a bad tip. That's not bad. Yeah. There's another question here from Recursive Chat. I feel like I'm not taking advantage of TypeScript's strengths. I have a lot of code that's foo bar instead of foo.bar. How do you fix that? How do you address that reference?
Oh, I see that there. So it's like Yeah, so you're using the string to reference the property name instead of the actual property. Well, there's a couple of ways, but let's go down. Let's just pick one. Let's say foo is your object. We'll say it's a customer. You could say customer, and then you could do like in square brackets with what are these things? Quotes?
Yeah, double quotes.
Those things.
We
Customer
call them
and
quotes,
name.
John.
Air quotes. So you do customer, instead of customer.name, you're doing customer square bracket quotes name.
Okay.
People do that in JavaScript and TypeScript sometimes when they can't figure out, does the object have that property or not? It's a safer way of doing it. But it also loses all the ability to do type checking, and you also, like, you're putting a string in there, so you could type, instead of name, you could type Jeff, right? So the way around that is to create interfaces. One of them is to create interfaces for your objects that have the properties on them that you want them to have. Even if those objects aren't coming from your front end, maybe they come from the back end, some kind of a DTO, data transfer object, whatever. Just create an interface in the front end for those, mark which ones are optional, which ones are required. It's the easiest way to get around that.
So there's an answer for your recursive chat.
Foo.bar.as.
Yeah.
Learning curve of Angular is much steeper than other frameworks, to be honest, by Kotlin. You got to pronounce that.
Yeah. Let's just stop at Kotlin. Gosh, that's it. You know, it depends on what your expertise is coming in. Like you were saying, John, some folks that are used to strongly typed frameworks they're gonna like TypeScript.
Yeah.
And they might gravitate towards Angular. Right?
And you know what? All three of them now, the three major ones we showed, have a CLI where you just say, create my new app and go. So the setup is no longer an issue, which it was back in Angular 2 when you started with it, Jeff.
Yeah.
So no longer is that an issue. So now, really, if you come from Java.NET typed background, Angular's kind of makes more sense. I find it to make more sense with people from ASP.NET or Java. If you come from a pure JavaScript world or an untyped language world or Python even, React seems to make a lot of sense. And then there's even people who are in the middle where they miss the days of being able to drop the script into a page and just start writing code and it works. Vue makes a lot of sense and that's easy for them. So when people say it's easier or not, I think it's very relative.
Yeah, absolutely. So QT goes further with that question about preference. Does that mean you like Vue more? Or you're more. I think you said you're more comfortable with Angular. You've got Angular being out the longest. You've got a longer history with it.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of like any tool you've used. I've got a favorite hammer, and I've been using it for 25 years in my garage. I bought a new one this year, but there's sometimes I'm more comfortable with the one I've had, even though it's not as good in some cases. In other cases, it's better.
And some of us even named our handles after our favorite programming languages. I don't know who would do that.
But you know what? I do love Vue and Angular. But if I had to pick personal preference, Vue and Angular are both side by side as my top two. React is fascinating to me, but I'm just not on the React train as much as I am the other two.
So, and what I find interesting about React, right, is this is Facebook's framework, and they built it specifically so they could render Facebook faster, right? Now, mixing the markup directly with the JavaScript in those JSX files, when I first saw that, it confused the heck out of me. Why would they think this would run faster? But right, that has something to do with how they position and interact with the DOM, I guess.
Wrong projects. Hold on, I got way too many of these going on. There we go.
The blue one.
It's not so much that embedding it in the function makes it go faster as it is the way it's working under the covers, the way they're actually replacing the DOM nodes is supposedly faster.
Okay.
Although when you say faster, a lot of the benchmarks you see are watching React versus Angular JS or early Angular 2.
Oh my goodness.
The new compiler for Angular, which is called Ivy, I-V-Y,
okay.
is actually in beta right now. You can use it in Angular 8, and it's coming out in Angular 9. That compiler, supposedly, in the tests I've run, a Hello World app is now 2.3K compressed.
Cool.
So it's smaller than the others. It's faster than the others. So faster, it's kind of like the browser wars, Jeff. Remember we were all talking about Chrome and IE and Safari and who's faster?
Yeah.
They're all so negligibly faster now that. So really, React is just about the style of programming. If you feel like I want to write code and when I'm ready to render something, just let me render it. React.
Yeah.
Everything's a component in React too.
Let me pause you right there. I want to welcome the 8 raiders that joined us from Mark Miller's channel. Code Rush have joined us. Thank you so much, Mark, for the raid. We appreciate you joining us. I'm here with John Papa, and we are talking about different JavaScript frameworks. We're looking at React here and talking about React, Vue, and Angular as part of a discussion leading up to the DEVintersection show coming up in November in Las Vegas. Thanks so much for the raid, Mark. What were you working on over there? Let us know in the chat room. And Mark, of course, Mark Miller, he'll be joining us for his Science of Great UI sessions, and I think he's doing a workshop also at DEVintersection as well. So if you enjoyed his channel, make sure you check out the Code Rush channel and check out his sessions at DEVintersection as well. It looks like there's some really good questions coming in on chat here.
Let's go for it.
Vue feels more like a stripped back Angular in terms of being more terse. Possibly, and that's possibly why you prefer that, says raise that something. Okay.
I think it's fair to say, let me make this one go away. So here's Vue on the left and here's Angular on the right. And again, if we look at the same things, let's go look at a component that is Heroes Vue. And over on the right, we'll go look at Heroes component. We'll just compare the code and not the template.
Sure.
So if we take 36 lines off of the Vue file, we're at approximately 72 lines of code. The Angular file is at 79, including squigglies, and so irrelevantly the same.
Yeah.
If
Close
we go to
enough.
the templates, about the same.
Yeah.
Honestly, what makes Angular bigger is some of the things I don't like about Angular, which is why do I have to tell you where the HTML file is? Why can't a convention just be, if the name of my file is heroes component TS, it's going to be heroes component HTML? Personal problem I have with it. I'm using TypeScript, so having TypeScript decorators means that's more code than you'll see in Vue. But guess what? In Vue 3, you can use TypeScript if you want to. So no, I don't feel. I actually have an article that's up there. It's my most popular article on my blog ever about Vue with TypeScript. I wrote 2 years ago.
Okay.
Folks should check it out because it actually compares an app with TypeScript and without TypeScript in Vue, and then with Angular, and it's arguably, you make your own call, but it's arguably not less code than it would be with Angular.
So we've talked a little bit around TypeScript here. It seems like there's a lot of uptick. A lot of the folks in the JavaScript communities are picking up on TypeScript, and they're seeing it as something to help improve their productivity.
Yep.
What's your opinion of how that's going around, and folks in those open source communities are looking at and viewing TypeScript?
I think it's a great question, and I believe today that everybody should be looking at TypeScript. Even the Vue team, they're rewriting Vue 3 in TypeScript to manage a large code base.
Oh my God.
TypeScript helps you manage the code. Doesn't mean you have to write it in TypeScript, because Vue, they're saying you can write in JavaScript or TypeScript. But having your code base written in TypeScript fixes thing like you and I fixed, Jeff, where you see right up front, this function wasn't returning a value and it should have been. Things like that. Would you rather find it while we're coding, or would you rather find it at 2 a.m. when your boss calls you and says, hey, we have a problem?
Right? That goes towards right, the cost and the time to fix an issue. It's so much faster when you're in your tools, when you're in your editor, versus when you're doing your runtime compiles, your linting, or you've actually deployed and you're browsing the site. The further out you get, the longer it takes to actually fix and deploy, right?
It is, and there were 2 inflection points for me when I decided to use TypeScript. And I have a course in TypeScript I wrote 6 years ago when it first came out, and I wasn't using it full time then, though. 2 big inflection points for me were, 1, everything you're using has to have typing support, which when TypeScript first came out, it was very difficult to say, well, I'm using jQuery or something with it, or Knockout. If I'm using those things, the typings aren't working. I don't really get any tooling support, so what's the point? Today, 99.9% of libraries have some kind of typing support, and if they don't, the VS Code editor will figure it out for you most of the time. The second thing that really flipped me on this was I don't have to use classes. Like you saw that other project in here, the yellow one. Let's go find it real quick. Boom. This one here is using TypeScript, but you would be hard pressed to find what's TypeScript in here. It's besides the interfaces.
Okay.
You start looking through the code, and you don't need the interfaces. This one has two things in it, this function, that are TypeScript. One, I said this thing is a heroes array.
Right. Yeah.
Two, this template returns a template result. If I don't want to use TypeScript, I could just do this, and we're good.
Yeah. That type checking it's a lifesaver when the projects get more complex.
It is, and it just, to me, once we were able to do functions, I really like writing functions. I come from overall JavaScript instead of, I like it more than classes, actually. And
nice.
By doing this, I'm like, you know what? I can just use functions and regular code that flows for me with types when I need them. React is picking up more on TypeScript. There are a lot of people who were using Flow for a while, which is their type of language. Here's a trivia quiz for you, Jeff. Do you know that the Angular team had originally come up with their own language that they were going to use for Angular 2?
Are you kidding?
And this wasn't AtScript.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And the biggest reason was, and I'm oversimplifying this, but
sure.
When it was introduced, one of the things they wanted the ability to have like the decorators or annotations in .NET on code, and that didn't exist in JavaScript.
Yeah.
Well, TypeScript existed, but it wasn't entirely implemented yet.
Okay.
So they got with the TypeScript team and said, hey, what if we work with you to get this implemented, and then we can just use that and we don't have to create our own language.
Yes. There's something to be said for, it seems like of the other big tech companies, right? Google, right? They started writing, right? Dart was theirs. Go was theirs, right?
Yeah.
But Microsoft maintains, of course, C#, F#, VB, C++ bindings for Windows, and their own compiler for C++. But Facebook doesn't really own a compiler. Amazon owns a Java compiler now. But I'm not sure how much I would trust some of these other companies when they say, oh yeah, we're going to write our own language. If Facebook said, hey, we're going to write our own language, is that really core to what they're trying to deliver? So I definitely understand why Google would say, yeah, let's use TypeScript. Let somebody else build the language.
A lot of the Angular team uses TypeScript and they use VS Code.
Nice. So go ahead.
I was just saying we probably should get to some of your questions. I see a lot of good ones in the chat too.
Yeah, Little Dan is asking, have you looked at Svelte? What's your opinion of it if you have seen it?
I like it. Svelte is it's less verbose. It does things much quicker. I prefer Vue, React, and Angular over it personally, but I feel like it doesn't fit a perfect niche. It's kind of like what happened to the mini iPad to me. I've got an iPad Pro and I love it.
Okay.
And I've got a phone and I love it. But I had a mini iPad at one point and it used to serve a purpose because it was the perfect in-between size. My phone was too small.
Yeah.
Now the phones are big enough for me to do what I need to do, and the iPad Pro serves the other purpose. So I kind of feel like Svelte, for me, fits in that middle ground, and I just personally don't use it because I feel like I'd rather go with Vue, Angular, or vanilla JavaScript.
Okay. Makes sense. QT chimes in and says, what should Angular do to increase their adoption?
They've got a ton right now. There's over 1 million people using it.
Yeah.
And it's growing still.
Can't argue with that.
If I was in charge of Angular, what I would do is literally once Ivy's out, which will be out soon, because they're all putting their efforts into that.
Okay.
Instead of performance, I would focus on getting more of the convention over configuration into Angular, because there's things in there that I'm constantly typing that I use snippets for that it's actually over 1 million people using it up on our marketplace. You wouldn't even need them in some cases if we could just get some convention over configuration.
Nice. I want to come back. I want to ask the rest of the questions that we have here in the chat room because I want to make sure that they get their questions answered. But I want to ask you about some of the plugins that you use here in Visual Studio Code because there's some things I'm seeing here that I'm really interested in. Now, I want to pin that question and come back to it.
You got it.
It's a little sad that I have to ask streamers questions. You're only one doing web dev at work. Recursive chat. It's okay. We're hanging out here all the time. You can find the Dev Intersection show every now and again here, and there's all kinds of folks that are streaming about JavaScript and other questions here that you can find. Other topics, languages. Rxjs. What is Rxjs? Abaddon1334 is talking about Rxjs. I'm not familiar with that one.
I'm not familiar with it either, but I'll check it out.
Yeah, Abaddon, if you have a link for that, let us know what that is. I'm not sure if it'll let you share a link here in the chat, but I'm very interested to hear more about that. Mobabo asks, how is lazy loading of routes in Vue versus Angular?
In some ways, it's the same. In some ways, it's slightly different. Let's take a quick look. So inside of my Vue app.
It's so handy to have both of these in the two languages, the same application.
It is. I find it very helpful. Let me, let's get rid of that one. And Angular's right there. And we'll go over here and we'll look at app route. Boom, boom, boom. So on the left-hand side is Vue, and you can see I've got a villains path. When I go to /villains, load this component dynamically, importing it, and it's located at this path.
Okay.
On the right, I've got a path called villains. We just leave the slash off. And I have a function called load children. That's additional, right? We don't have that over here. But it's literally doing the same thing. It's saying import instead of importing a Vue file, it's importing a module, and it's using a then with a promise to say then load this thing. So you can lazy load with either. To me, the big difference is not syntax. It's that in Vue, you can lazy load a component, which in turn then will create a file, a chunk, or a bundle called villains, which includes this component and all of its direct children.
Okay, so I don't have to go and compose all that stuff. It'll do it for me.
Yep, figures it out through its chain. And then on Angular, you don't reference a component, you reference a module, which is really like a manifest of a bunch of components.
Okay.
So they both have them, just slightly different syntax.
All right.
Good question.
Recursive chat says Facebook owns their own PHP compiler. Another similar. Yes, you're right. They do own that. Snoopaloopy asks, do you find certain frameworks, like Angular, work better with certain backends? Express for JavaScript, .NET with the API controllers? They all work the same?
No, the only time you run into trouble for me is when you try to take one of them, let's say Angular, and you're using it to generate your web pages, but then you're also using ASP.NET, PHP, Java, whatever, and you're also trying to render pages. I can tell you've been down this road, Jeff.
Who's
rendering what?
the Borg of frameworks to build a website, just glomming everything together.
I like ASP.NET to be my web API.
Okay.
And I like Angular in this case, let's say, to be my front end. I don't like crossing the streams. I like to keep them separate. If you like ASP.NET Razor to generate your pages, go for it.
Yeah.
But maybe then you don't really want to use an Angular review, for example.
Sure. That actually brings up, I had an interesting problem with another streamer friend that we have here, Fierce Kittens. She builds love the names. She's a professional developer for a game studio, and she was building a bot to interact with some of the facilities, not on Twitch, but on a third-party provider. And this other service that she was integrating with using .NET, using WinForms WPF with .NET Core, didn't implement WebSockets by the standards, but instead implemented Socket.io. So when you would make a connection using a WebSocket, whether it was in the browser or from within the WebSocket object that .NET provides, it would drop the connection within seconds. Like, okay, you've gone a little far there and you've implemented Socket.io not to a standard, and now nobody can maintain a connection unless they're Socket.io. So now you got to, just like you're saying, now I've got to start Borg, right? Combining things. I want to have a Windows application, but I got to put a JavaScript thing out there so I can connect to and maintain the connection. And that gets...
Then you end up with like bridge code and other stuff, and that's not fun.
No, gosh. Such a pain to have to manage that.
Yeah, but if all you're doing is building a back-end API and you want a front end, you can pick any back-end API and any front end, and they the only thing they talk to each other with is they both agree that we're going to use something like HTTP to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And you're good.
Right. WebSockets should be a standard. This should be something that's part of HTTP that we can use. So that was an interesting problem. And let me ask you a question. We mentioned we brought up the style guide earlier. Somebody on my stream earlier today said, hey, we could use a style guide for Blazor. Based on your experience with the Angular style guide, it feels like that's something that a community should come together and say, this is what we like, and this could be a thing.
I think that's fair. I mean, somebody could create one and then go with it. What doesn't work well to me is when a company owns it.
Oh, yeah.
Because when a company owns it, things end up getting shifted in one direction or another. I like when people own it. Like if we go to the Angular JS style guide, let's just Google it real quick.
Look at that. First one.
This is the version 1. You can see this one at 1.24,000 stars meant a lot in the top list. But you can see here, like opening sentence, by the way, this is why I wrote opinionated, which it's my opinion. Yeah. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong, right?
Sure.
And then it's like, hey, if that's what you want, great. The purpose of the guide is provide guidance, not rules, guidance, right? All community. And if you look at the number of contributors on this thing, if we go back, what do they put now? 175 different contributors on this. Nice. That's the way life should be with something like a style guide. And there should be a process for proposing something and then accepting it and having it considered. And the only person I ever let me just say, yes, do it this way was Igor Minar, because the guy is the lead on the Angular team. And he's like, John, you're doing this way. And he was always kind. It's like, you're doing it this way. And in a very nice way, he'd say, but this is leading him down the wrong path. You should do this instead. And here's why. And I'd be like, makes so much sense. Let's do it.
Yeah. Managing something like this on GitHub as a living document, it enables pull requests, issues to be open so that you can have those discussions. It's a brilliant way to do it.
And it allows, as you can see, like just looking at the first one, everything is what's the rule? And then what do you do? Why do you do it? And then I tried to show an avoid and a recommended. Just because if you don't show an example sometimes, you know how sometimes you're like, okay, I get it, but show me how to do it, Yeah,
if I was doing this wrong, what would it look like? What would it smell like so that I can identify?
Yep.
Okay.
What some people may not know is this right here, the style links, those are in there because there's linters now that people have written that will actually check for my styles.
Wow.
So I gave them codes, just random numbers, so people could reference them.
Yeah. Can you do me a favor? Can you grab the link to that and drop it in the chat room?
Sure.
So that if anybody isn't familiar with the style guide, they can follow up and catch
make
up
your
with
own for whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Or adapt for your organization. So I hinted a little bit about you've been doing some tremendous things with Visual Studio Code, and you showed us bouncing around a couple of them there.
Mm-hmm.
What are the top extensions that you're using there and that you recommend folks check out if they're professional JavaScript developers?
Well, I've got a bunch loaded.
Oh my gosh!
Obviously, because we do Azure, right? So some of these are here because I'm playing with Azure quite a bit. I've got some Angular ones. What I've done is I've created an Angular Essentials extension that if you load this, it's an extension pack which loads all of these things for you.
Oh, tremendous.
So you don't have to remember all the ones I have. Yep.
Nice.
There's no code in this extension. It just says go get all these things and load it.
Okay.
Which I recommend to do. And there's one for Vue as well. The one I use for Vue is Vue VS Code snippets. Okay. This is written by Sarah Drasner.
Oh, yes. We know Sarah.
So it's her extension, but it also depends on Vter, which is what lights up Vue inside of VS Code. Without this extension, those .vue files, none of that stuff would have syntax highlighting or anything.
Oh, and get the little icons and things.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
And I'll show you my favorite one, of course. And I wrote this one, so I'm biased. But Peacock.
They did the coloring for you.
Yep.
Nice.
And it's become pretty good. We've got 330,000 people using it now, which has been
That's tremendous.
great, but it's also been a big burden for me to keep the pull requests and features up to date.
It's become its own job now. My gosh.
It has, and I do this on my own, so it's not like I can say at work, hey, yeah, I'm going to go create a colorful extension today. Can you let me not do work?
But there's something to be said for, you've got a community now that's invested, and they're using Visual Studio Code in great ways. So
it is using Azure, though. If you go check out the repository, open the link. You can see down here we've got our pipelines and all that stuff being set up. I think it's running 150 tests now against 3 different operating systems, Windows, Mac, and Linux, and against different versions of Node. I think 3 versions of Node each. So
wow. To ensure it all is working properly. Spicy Condiment in the chat room says he uses it as well. Terrific.
Hey, thank you.
Rambling Geek says, I just thought of an extension, a one-click button to share extensions with others. There is an extension that publishes your extensions, isn't there? Or that syncs it?
The settings sync, which is this one, actually saves your settings, snippets, themes, everything, so you can put them up in a gist somewhere, or a gist, whatever. You can do that. There may be some that share extensions. I don't know.
It's an interesting idea there. Well, cool. This has been great, John. Thank you so much for sharing, for hanging out and talking a little bit, walking through some code, definitely answering some questions for our viewers here.
Sure.
A lot of really.
Do you mind if I do one quick plug?
Oh, please do.
So I've been writing articles at my blog for a while at johnpapa.net, but I also, and I post this on Twitter at John_Papa, but I've been writing on dev.to recently. And you can see my most recent article about writing vanilla JavaScript. Forget a framework, forget a library, just try to write it. A lot of pickup on this. There's been like 50 comments. And if you're interested in reading more about JavaScript or Azure, definitely check me out on dev.to, please.
You can copy the link, drop it into chat so folks can bookmark that. Bookmark? Do people still bookmark? So people can check that out.
There you go. Thank you.
Wow, that's great. All right. I am going to come back to that 2-shot of us. There we go. So folks can still sign up. There's still seats open for the workshops coming up at the event in November. I know they're still selling tickets to the event. And it's the 2 days before the event. These are pre-cons.
Yep.
So make sure, friends, if you do want to attend the workshop, you book a couple days before the event so you can attend. Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate you joining us. And I see Dan is just about ready to go here.
Oh, Dan Wahlin, he's coming on?
Yeah, that guy.
Man, I don't know. Everybody on this thing, stick around for Dan and give him a lot of garbage. Here's the key word to get Dan going. Ask him if his favorite color is Dan Wahlin blue.
Dan Wahlin blue. He has his own color named after him?
He has his own color. It's called Dan Wahlin blue. Ask him about this, and he'll laugh. The other thing you got to ask him about is line 17. Ask him what line 17 means.
Oh, man. I have a feeling we're setting something up here that's just... This is not going to... Oh, boy. All right. File those away, chat room. Let's see what happens here. Thanks so much, John. I really appreciate you joining us. Have a good rest of your afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you at the event in November.
Yep, catch you there. Thanks, everybody.
All righty. We'll see you. And we're going to come back to just me for a second. Hello, friends. It's just me over here. It's Jeff. And there's John. He's signed out. I am going to queue up our friend Dan here. All righty. Let's make sure he's all set. So here comes, this is the cutover. This is how we, thank you, Recursive Chat. Yeah, big thank you to our friend John Papa there for joining us. It's sometimes a little bit of a struggle to get some of these folks get on their schedule, and I really appreciate him taking some time to talk with us. All right, let's give a call over to our friend Dan. I see he's typing. I'm waiting here to see what he's typing. Nope, here we go. We're going to call Dan. And there we go. I think there we go. Can you hear me, Dan?
I can. How you doing?
All right. We are all set. Let me head over to this view. There we go. And let's bring on our friend. There's Dan Wahlin. Hello, hello. So good to see you.
Hey everyone, how you doing?
Oh my gosh.
You hear me okay with the mic? Since we tried to up the quality level a little this time.
Oh yeah, no, that's a great mic.
A little better? Okay, cool.
Oh, for sure.
Here's all I got to say first, man. I got to get one of your hats. That's a cool hat.
You like the hat? You like the hat?
Yeah, I need one of those.
So, like my marketing folks, every now and again, I show up at an event and I've got one of these hats, and they're like, "Hey, that's not official branding." I'm like, "Well, it's the icon." And yeah, I just put it on the hat with whatever. I have an Azure hat. I have others. If Shirley lets me, I'm going to put together a DEVintersection hat with this turquoise green that you see around here and the two links. I got to do something like that. But
wait,
yeah,
did you make that hat then? That's
this
not an
is
official Microsoft hat.
No.
Oh, that's all. That's why I like it, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. So for the Visual Studio 2019 launch, I had this made, and on the back it has the date of the launch, and I had a couple of them made. I gave one, of course, to our friend Scott Hunter. Make sure that got to give the boss one of the hats when I make the hats.
Oh yeah,
so
Scott's cool, so he deserves one.
Oh yeah. So Dan Wahlin, why don't you give a quick introduction so that folks who don't know who you are can can learn a little bit more about you.
Sure, yeah. So thanks everyone for all one of you for tuning in, probably. But
we've got about 80 folks hanging out here watching right now.
Hey, that's actually great. That's 79 more than I was planning. So now I'm super nervous, right? No, just kidding. Yeah, my name's Dan Wahlin. For those that don't know me, I run a consulting company called Wahlin Consulting, and do a lot of .NET Core, stuff like that. A lot of Docker, Kubernetes, Azure, but also spend a ton of time on front-end technologies, which is, I think, what we're going to talk more about, right, Jeff?
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, like VueJS, which I suspect you already covered.
Talked a bit about with John. Yep. It talked a little bit about comparing the different frameworks, too. There were a lot of questions about why would I choose Vue over Angular? And, why do you prefer this one over the other one types of questions?
Yeah, and that's always a hard one to answer because, like, I do just the nature of my business, I have to work with a lot of clients, right? So I kind of had to learn some Vue, some Angular, some React. And but, yeah, there's pros and cons to all of them. We can
go into
a little of that later maybe. But, yeah, cool. So that's me.
All right. Now, you're focusing primarily on Angular when we get to the two workshops we were talking with John about. There's two of them, Vue and Angular, pre-conference workshops, and you're carrying more of the Angular here. I'm going to ask you the same question that some of the folks asked in the chat room to John. Why do you prefer Angular over Vue, or the other way around?
Well, and for me, to be real honest, it's not that I prefer any of them. Let me explain what I mean by that.
Sure.
I will admit, most of the groups I work with are enterprise type groups.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I do a lot of .NET and stuff like that, because there's a lot of .NET in the enterprise.
Sure.
So here's my breakdown. I find that developers that have what I'm going to call a frameworky background. I don't think that's a word, but we're going to make a new word, Jeff.
Sure. We're frameworkers.
That's right. We're frameworkers. There you go. It's like bricklayers.
Yeah.
I find that people that are in that world who are used to things like naming containers, namespaces, packages, whatever it may be, Java.NET, Python, things like that.
Sure.
That Angular, in my opinion, plays really, really well to that group because there's a lot of object-oriented people typically in that group.
Okay.
Angular uses classes. That's what you do for pretty much everything in Angular is TypeScript classes.
Sure.
You still can use functions as well, but the main components and services and things like that are all classes.
Okay.
And I find that I guess you could say, since we're going to talk a little about architecture, Angular gives you, it's like walking into a tool shed And if you're a woodworker, which I'm not, but I wish I had that hobby, it's like walking into, a friend's tool shed going, oh my gosh, you got a Dremel, you got a buzzsaw, you got
my gosh,
every tool is available. It's like walking into Home Depot or Lowe's, right?
They've got all the toys.
All the toys are here. Well, to me, that's Angular.
Okay.
You have this full, really rich, powerful framework that you can build anything you can think of. You don't have to do a lot of guesswork on what you want to use, although you can substitute different things, and I like that. It's very flexible. Okay, now let's compare that with, say, React, which is more of a pure UI library, right? Everything's a component in React.
Right.
And so as a result, it's kind of like walking into a tool shed or Home Depot or something going, man, that's an awesome tool or set of tools over there, but it's only like one shelf, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Now, here's the pros and cons. I have a ton of flexibility with React because everything you might want to do is not in React.
Right.
You're going to have to make some choices now as a company. And for instance, they have a React router. It's great. I just use React router, but there's some other options.
Okay.
Third-party components, state management, all these things. There's not really what I'm going to call built-in. They have a pattern. You have Redux and a kind of a Flux thing, but it's different that way. Whereas like Angular has NGRX, which is third-party. It's in all fairness, but they work very closely with the Angular team. Now, Vue, to me, is a compromise between those two. So it's kind of like walking into, you don't get all the tools,
right?
But you get a lot of tools.
Okay.
And so Vue, I think, is a great compromise where it's very easy to pick up. Of the three, I think Vue is the easiest to get started with, in my opinion.
Yeah, John was saying the same thing. If you're not familiar with any of those frameworks, as a starting point, not bad.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And you know what? If John said it, I'm going to back it up because John's the man. So
it must be true.
I'm not going to argue with John. No, John's one of my best friends. So we think a lot alike on that, actually.
Yeah. There's definitely something to be said about how and when you choose a framework. And your experiences before you come in, like you were saying, if you're used to other frameworks, if you're used to being in a PHP, in a .NET framework, and you want that framework feel, I get it. That makes sense. So, when you do things with Angular, right? And we're on, what's the current version of Angular? I was saying to the 8. Oh my god! See, yeah. I got in at 2 and I left at 4, and I'm kind of left in the lurch here. Are there things that I need to be aware of that I, as somebody who would want to level up my skills from 4 to 8, are there things that I should absolutely be like, Jeff, you got to go spend time with this?
Well, here's the really good news with Angular. I will admit the Angular JS, the old one, to the new Angular. Yeah, Angular 1 to Angular 2. Now, that was a rough transition because they called it Angular, but they could have called it Foo, and it would have been a valid name because it was totally different.
Okay.
So, that was a big transition. But if you last did 4 or even 2, the vast majority of what you would have done, even in 2, is still valid in 8.
Oh, and tremendous.
So it's been very, very stable. Now, there's been some deprecated APIs. I mean, you're going to have that, right? Especially, it's only been out, several years now, but you have that in every framework.
Absolutely.
But as a team, it'd be easy for you to upgrade.
Terrific. Okay.
Yeah. Now, another big feature of where I think Angular can be a huge win, especially in the enterprise, is they have a CLI, which is just, in my opinion, the best out there. Nothing out there even comes close to what the Angular CLI does.
So CLI, right? That's
command line tool.
There you go. Just making sure our friends in the chat know what we're talking
about. And it has like an ng update command. So, you can do ng new and create a new project. But, we have create React app for that. And Vue has that. And they all have this. What really sets Angular apart moving forward, though, is there's an NG update. I just did it last night, actually.
Okay.
I had a guy on GitHub leave a comment on something, and he was right. It was kind of out of date, this repo.
Okay.
And so I did an NG update, and literally within 5 minutes or so, I was up to Angular 8 and pushed that up to GitHub, and I was good to go.
You were up to Angular 8 from what previous version?
On that one, I was on 6.
Okay.
So luckily, I had 0 code changes. If you're on 4, there will likely be some.
Okay.
But minimal. There's some Rxjs changes and things like that, but let's call it the core of Angular has not really changed since Angular 2.
Okay. So, I mean, that's definitely a benefit to folks who have been around it for some time, or even if you haven't been around it, the longevity of the framework is definitely something that folks can point to and say, there's stability here, there's a community here, there's features and things that I can rely on outside of just Google's development of it.
Yeah, and that's what I love about all 3 of these, actually. So obviously Angular is from a team at Google. Yeah. React is from a team at Facebook. Now Vue is kind of the odd man out, but because it's not by a company, but I actually think that's a good thing in that it helps drive, the companies also kind of innovate, and everybody borrows from each other.
Certainly.
And the community behind Vue is huge. And so, of the 3, it's always hard to say with JavaScript, right? Because just since we've been talking, Jeff, there's been 5 new frameworks came out?
And 2 new browsers.
And 2 new browsers.
Right. That's a thing.
I mean, seriously.
Ooh.
So it's always hard to predict. I wish I had a crystal ball, because you never know. But as of today, I don't really think you can go wrong with either of those 3. I think it really depends on your team skills. If you are comfortable with TypeScript out of the box and you kind of come from an object-oriented background, things like that, I think Angular is a no-brainer. If you're not comfortable with some of that and you just want to do, let's just call it standard JavaScript, regular functions type things.
Vanilla JavaScript, yeah.
Vanilla JavaScript, yeah. I mean, React's going to be as close as you can get to that, aside from JSX, which is, the HTML markup technology.
Sure.
And then Vue again is a combo between those.
Okay. So I know you have some samples that you have built that you show folks around Angular. Is there something that you can show us? We could talk a little bit around here that shows some of the power, some of the cool things that are happening with Angular.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me go ahead and we'll get the share screen going here.
All right.
Or try to. We'll hope the Wi-Fi at the company I'm at is going to cooperate. And let me know once that comes through.
There we go. Got it.
Awesome. All right. So this is actually, while you're doing that, you can say what you're going to say, and I'll go to the GitHub repo here.
No, I was going to say, right, I mean, Angular is the oldest of the 3 frameworks that we've been talking about here. I mean, vanilla JavaScript isn't really a framework, but of the 3, okay, it's the oldest, so there's definitely something to be said for stability, and I feel like of the 3, Google and their team has really landed the idea of managing a framework. They've stopped moving fast and breaking things.
Last I asked, so they used to say that AngularJS, because they released this all open source, but it was used internally for a long time before it got released, and that goes back to AngularJS. Back in the day, they used to say there was like 1,500 apps inside of Google, I believe. I think that's the number, that were AngularJS. Now, Angular is newer, obviously. I asked Brad Green, who used to be the director of the team, and now it's Jules is the director now. She's awesome. But I asked him about a year ago, I said, hey, how many of those 1,500 apps have been converted? And he estimated that at least 500 had already been converted. Now, the reason I mention that is the same can be said for React and Facebook. They kind of dog food their own stuff.
Sure.
To me, if I'm a manager of a team, that is a huge deal, because I've jumped on technologies that died, and we all know some names, that
Not gonna.
Let's not.
some valuable metals that are nice and bright. Not gonna name any. Mr. Papa might have some insight into some of the
Nice
what I'm
and
referring to.
bright, have the word light. Anyway, so there's been some stuff out there that obviously has been super popular and then just kind of died. One day you wake up and it's gone.
Yeah, and
that's what I really love about these.
Coincidentally, in the chat room, Boom Boom is saying yes. Let's take a hat off and pour one out for Jquery.
And here's the funny thing with Jquery. It's not. So I have I do a lot with Pluralsight, and I have a Jquery course.
Okay.
It's still super popular. Believe it or not.
Really? Okay.
Super popular. Yeah, I'm just like, there's a lot of people that just haven't bought into jumping into some of these frameworks.
Okay.
So but it's still out there and hanging around.
Yeah, that's what. If folks are interested in that, well, I mean, that begs the question. I mean, a lot of the features of jQuery are now features of the DOM, features of common JavaScript libraries, or even the language. Is there a reason why you would choose to continue using jQuery?
I think a lot of it is either the technology you're using already had it kind of like embedded, That's probably one. I think the other is some teams are just comfortable with it, so they kept going. And that's probably the two biggest reasons. I think it, to me, to kind of wrap up our initial discussion here, because I know you already went into this a little bit with John. I say this a million times, and it's not a unique saying, but right tool for the right job absolutely applies. If you just need a DOM manipulator that also has Ajax support and animation support and stuff like that, then jQuery could get the job done for you.
Sure.
But if you need a full SPA framework, single page application, you need routing and all this stuff, then jQuery is not going to get the job done for you, and you don't want to write that by hand.
Oh gosh, no. And to that point, WBW72 in chat says not everyone gets to do SPAs. Not everyone gets to do single page applications.
Exactly. A good example. Jeff, how many forms have you written in your career?
Oh my gosh. Right? Web forms in ASP.NET, building different forms to just capture data, save it, regurgitate it on a detail screen that has an edit link, opens it back up, be able to... Oh, Dan. My gosh. Yes.
Probably hundreds, I bet. I know easy. I have. And see, now that's a good example where if all you needed was client-side validation, because you're always going to have your server... Well, you should always have your server-side validation. jQuery gets the job. It gets the job done because there's a jQuery validate. It's actually a great library. It's a really easy way to validate your forms and show and hide error messages.
For sure.
So that might be an argument for, I'm just going to use jQuery for that. Now, you might say, no, I'm not even going to do that. I'm just going to write vanilla JavaScript, and I'd be okay with that too. Right tool for the right job.
Yeah. Now, Angular gives me a lot more flexibility to build an entire application like we're seeing here in your GitHub repository.
Yeah, so what John and I are doing at this workshop, and I promise for the people listening, we won't turn this into like a advertising, what do they call those, infomercial. But we're going to be doing this Angular architecture workshop at DEVintersection.
Yep.
And the idea is we've done a ton, John and I have done a ton of kind of getting started with Angular workshops over the years, all the way back to AngularJS. We even used to do jQuery once, and Silverlight back in the day. I mean, we've been doing
there. It was. You said the word.
Oh, I did. That's like Harry. That's like Harry Potter. Shoot, what's his name? My mind's going blank.
The framework that must not be named.
Yeah, that's the framework that should not be uttered or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm cursed now.
Yeah, there you go, Ninja Ola.
Voldemort. There we go. But anyway, it's one of those things that we finally reached a point where people were like, "Hey, we know the basics now. Help us through the process of like if I'm in, I can't really show you with this camera, but I'm in a boardroom right now at a company.
Okay.
In lunch, it was open. And imagine we're around the boardroom, and you can't see it again, but there's a whiteboard right in front of me here that we could use. What would we do to start the process? From planning to the initial application structure, to what are the gotchas to watch out for, what are the best practices, those type of things.
Sure.
From kind of cradle to grave, what should we do? So this GitHub repo covers a lot of those concepts. Now I've already started the app, and Jeff, we can you lead the way. I'll jump into code here later. But so as an example, I have a planning template I go through with companies, which you'll see embedded in an iframe here. Extremely simple, but if I kind of go through this just real quick, let me see if I can get forward. There's 9 things that at a bare minimum, I always go through with teams. So I won't bore everybody, because I guarantee our sentiment analysis will go off the cliff on this, because it's not exciting. But first off, you got to know what your app is. Minor detail, right?
For sure. What are you trying to achieve?
Exactly. I mean, that's an easy one. But, like app features, everybody goes, app features, well, that's kind of dumb. That's easy. Yeah, but that's really going to drive things like my module organization for my Angular app.
Oh, yeah.
So we need to really talk through what are the app, like the high-level features, so that we can start planning our Angular modules. How are we dealing with security? Is it 100% server-side, which it would be server-side either way, but are we also passing down some security info like a group name, to Angular to show and hide things maybe?
Some roles, that kind of thing, some claim information. Okay,
yep. Yeah. And then, again, I won't bore you here, but like, how are we logging? How are we handling business rules? Is it client-side? Are we doing it on the server side? Are we talking with HTTP? Are we going to use like SignalR and WebSockets? These are all the discussions we need to have. And then like shared's a big one. A lot of people know in Angular how to create what's called a service, and it's just a class that's a singleton. Okay. And it's super easy to create. You can do ng generate service, nggs in the CLI, and you can make a service. But a lot of people don't realize that Angular also has the ability to create a shared library. So let's say, Jeff, I don't know if you've ever written have you ever written a calendar from scratch by chance?
It's funny you should say that. We built a calendar from scratch about a month ago on stream using Blazor, and it was hard.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not trivial,
things,
right?
Like you start off going, oh, I can knock this out in a couple hours, and then you get into it, and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is so involved, because you got leap years, you got previous month days and next month days, and so
how big do I make the grid? Is it 5 rows for a month, or is it 4 rows for a month? Oh,
that's cool. I'll have to. I didn't see that section you did there on Twitch. I'll have to look at that. But
that was a thing.
It's
still not done yet.
It's a thing. I got a story there, but we don't have time, so I'll shut up. But so let's say that you wrote this calendar in TypeScript, we'll say,
okay,
right? Or JavaScript, doesn't matter.
Sure.
And we know that we never want to write that ever again. Yeah. We got it working. It's good. The whole team's going to use it. In fact, we've decided every app moving forward is going to use it. Well, in Angular, it's really easy to share functionality, but it's not so obvious how to share functionality across projects. Okay, so this is where NPM comes in, and you might then do ng generate library.
Okay.
Put your, I know it was Blazor, but we'll say it was TypeScript or JavaScript you did.
Sure.
Put that into this library, and then do an NPM publish, and either publish that internally for our company, or maybe it's public. I don't know.
Okay.
Well, those are the discussions we need to have, right, Jeff?
Not only do we need to discuss those things, but we need to make doubly sure that all of our syntax is correct on line 17.
Oh, geez. John must have primed you.
Chat room, that was not prompted at all. No.
Did he tell you the story behind that?
Well, he's actually in chat right now suggesting that we need to ask about.
Oh, no. Oh, man. John's in. Now we're in trouble.
Yes.
Yeah, so real quick story. John and I are up on stage, and we got a big group in front of us at a conference. We're speaking together on a talk. It was on TypeScript, actually. And I'm in the TypeScript playground. You ever use that on typescriptlang.org?
Oh, yeah, sure. It's a little text box you can key in and try some of the syntax.
Exactly. So I'm on there just demoing a really basic feature, and I think I typed a colon instead of a semicolon just by accident, just
Sure.
didn't hit the shift key hard enough. So I'm going, and then all of a sudden I'm seeing red, but I'm trying to figure out what the heck's wrong because, a colon and semicolon are pretty close, and I'm just kind of having fun with it. John's having fun with it because we do. And someone in the crowd just yells out, like screams, line 17!
Oh, jeez.
So John and I were like, okay, line 17 it is. And so ever since then, he's like, Dan, make sure you don't screw up line 17.
Yeah.
So that's the story behind line 17.
Oh, my
Thank
goodness.
you, John. Thank you, John, for that.
So similarly, our friend Brian Clark, who does a lot of work with Visual Studio Code, and you see him here on Twitch, he's Clark.io on Twitch. He wrote an extension. Awesome. Oh, he's tremendous. He wrote an extension for Visual Studio Code that lets folks in chat connect in and highlight lines of code in your Visual Studio Code editor while you're working. So as a presenter, instead of having somebody stand up in the back row and say, line 17, they can actually drop in a command into chat and highlight Visual Studio Code. Neat stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah, right?
It sounds somewhat scary, but cool.
Between that and live share, I think there's some interesting collaborations that are possible with a chat room, with a live interactive broadcast like this that folks can do. There's a question about Vue project architecture that I want to put a pin on and come back to after we talk about Angular project architecture here.
Yeah, we'll focus on this, but we can, if we have time, we can circle back. So
for sure.
This is the boring stuff, right? So we don't spend much time going through this in the workshop, but it leads to these other things. So for instance, Angular has lazy loading, it's called. In a large enterprise app, you don't want to load all the features right when the app loads because that could slow down the homepage load, right?
For sure.
So this is a really basic example, but watch when I click customers, you'll see that loaded that feature below. When I click orders, that loaded that feature. Phenomenal features, by the way, huh? I spared no expense.
Thank you.
Yes. But from an architecture standpoint, the number one thing I see, one of the number one things I see teams not doing right in, like when I'm brought into an app that's already been started, is they didn't take the time to go to the whiteboard, that forgotten thing that our caveman ancestors used to do, and to spec out the features, because generally every feature of your app at a minimum should have a feature module. And if you're new to Angular, this is a way to organize it. Think of it as a bucket, right? And then you might optionally have a feature routing module. This is where your routes would go for that feature. Because Jeff, if you did a feature, let's say you had a little team of 5 and you're doing, invoicing feature.
Right.
Well, who knows more about your feature? You or me, who's not on the team?
Yeah. And then I've got to communicate it to you at some point if you're going to consume that, if you're going to make that part of something bigger.
Exactly. And that's why if you organize it right, Angular can be just this phenomenally structured framework that's easy to maintain, easy to find issues, but you got to plan for this up front. So one of those things is you need to plan for your modules. So that's one thing that's in here. Some other things that are from an architecture standpoint is when data flows through an app, you have what's called change detection. React has this and Vue has this, and it's the way that when the data changes on the front end in the browser, that the UI can be updated. So for example, when I click on John Doe, it shows in Jane Doe and Michelle Thompson, and you get the idea.
Sure.
Now, let me go to this one though. So I'm going to push a customer into an array. Okay, now this is using an Angular service that it's going to call. It's going to add a customer, but I'm not going to change the array. So what I mean by that is I'm going to mutate the array, right? I'm going to push into the array, but I'm not going to make a new array. Now watch what happens here. Phenomenal, huh? Did you see that? You got to look really closely. No, and you're like, no, I didn't see it, Dan.
I'm lost. Yeah.
Nothing.
Okay.
Well,
nothing actually happened.
And that's because, and this is the case pretty much across the board for these spas, is that there's a reason immutable data is considered a good thing. Now, now I hit that twice. I think I hit it twice. Now watch, I'm going to do this one, but this time what I'm going to do is not mutate the array. I'm going to make a new array and then add to that new array. Now watch what happens here. Now see how my first two now show up right there? That's my first two.
Yeah.
There's my third.
Okay.
Now the point of this discussion is that in Angular and React and Vue for that matter, you need to think through how your data flows through the app. Now this could get into a bigger discussion on something called state management and stores, but we won't have time for that.
Okay.
But if you start mutating objects or arrays, well, imagine, Jeff, your calendar, for example, needed a ton of data, but it has like sub properties in the object, and it's like this dot this dot this dot this type thing.
Oh my gosh, yes. Right. I'm trying to push schedule information around, right?
Yeah, like scheduling. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do that, imagine if Angular had to actually watch every single one of those nested properties.
Oh my gosh.
It would get slow, right?
Yeah, it would get so almost distracted to oversimplify by all the concerns that it would have to manage and keep an eye on.
Exactly. And so the idea here is that another big discussion that needs to go on, and this isn't just an Angular thing. This is React and Vue and all these, is they do kind of a by ref comparison. They look at, has the outer object changed? If it hasn't, and I only changed an item in the array, well, the original array is still there in memory. It didn't change.
Sure.
Therefore, the change detection goes up, nothing to see here, because the outer array didn't change. And so in Angular, we have this thing called ng on changes that you can hook into to know when data changes. And I'm not really using it here, but imagine when I push in, let me refresh real quick. Imagine when I push in a new customer here, that I also do some totals on, like, I don't know, customer order total or something like that. Well, I need to know when a new customer comes in, because that would change the calculations, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what ng on changes can do. But watch, I'm going to refresh again, and watch when I'm going to add to the array, but I'm not going to change the array. I'm going to mutate it, in other words. Now see how ng on changes doesn't show up down here?
Yeah.
But I just hit that many times. Right there.
And now we get
this one makes a new copy of the array or a new copy of the object. And anyway, this is another big discussion, is how does data flow throughout your application? There.
So you're really taking control over how much memory is being allocated. Where are we reusing these objects? And like you said, the mutating, that's important to keep an eye on. I know some of our friends that do functional programming are all about the immutable objects.
Yeah.
So
it's big here too.
Yeah, there's a time and place, it feels like, for both of these concepts.
Exactly. And that's kind of the big thing that, from an architecture standpoint, there's just all these little things that if you would have known up front, totally would have changed how you wrote your code.
Oh, for sure.
And it's those little things I find that, either a team jumps into Angular, React, or Vue, and they're given a deadline. They got no training. They just are on their own. You know how it is when you got to meet a deadline. You just do your best.
Yeah. You turn into just output code as fast as possible. Doesn't matter if it works or not. We'll fix it later.
And, you always have that kind of, you ever had that, Jeff, where you have that like sinking feeling because you're like, man, I don't know if I'm doing this right.
Never had that. Never had that problem.
That's good to hear, Jeff.
How about you in the chat room? Have you ever had that not so fun feeling about writing a project? Give me an F in the chat room if you've had anything like that. You're concerned as you're going along here. So nobody.
I suspect we'll have some. Either that or people are just kidding themselves.
Yeah. Foffy Scrimshaw says, yeah, my team 3 years ago on the app they were developing. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Nobody likes that feeling. My gosh.
No, and let's face it, nobody knows it all. I mean, I've been doing Angular for a long time now, and there's still stuff, every day just about. It's like, oh, how long has that been there? I mean, there's just always new things to learn.
Sure.
But getting back to this, the kind of thing I just ran, this is the structuring components section of this workshop, and we kind of talk about how to organize what we call a container component. And this is good for React and Vue too, by the way. This is not an Angular concept. The idea is, so let's say we have this, Jeff. We have this screen. Let's go back here real quick. And we have kind of a list. And then when you click on it, we have the details, right? Kind of the master detail that you've all...
Oh, sure. Right, I've got an order, and here's the line items for the products I ordered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, nothing new, nothing cutting edge, pretty standard. Well, how do you organize that, though? So, for example, does this component right here on the left, is it responsible for getting the list? Is this responsible for getting the details? Is there a parent that maybe manages the children? The
relationship between the two. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's another, thing you can discuss is, do we do what's called container presentation? They used to call it smart dumb components, but that was insulting to the dumb components. So we stopped, we don't want to insult a component. So we call it container presentation. And the idea is that the parent, which is kind of think of that as everything up here, sort of, right up here, that the parent would go and get the data, feed it to the children, or this child in this case, like this one on the left here.
Okay.
And then as this child clicks, how do we get data over to this? Because these are two unique components. So we have three total. We have the parent, we have the list, we have the details. Okay.
So would you do something like raise an event out to the parent that says, oh, somebody clicked me, you go figure out what else needs to be done?
You got it.
Okay.
You got it. And that's one way. Now, is it the right way? I'm not going to ever say it's the right way, right? It always depends, right tool for the right job. But in this example, what that means, if you do what you said, which I agree with in this case, is, we raise an event. It's called an output property or an output event. Goes up to the parent. It goes and gets the data and then feeds it to the child. Now, the idea here is who's responsible for getting the data, though? The parent.
Okay.
Now, the rationale there is if you have this is a pretty simple example, obviously. If you had a ton of these children, let's imagine, Jeff, you did 3 of them, and I did 3 of them, and John did 2 of them, and there's somebody did the parent, and we all didn't talk.
Yeah.
You're getting data, John's getting data, I'm getting data, and then, Michelle over here now has to debug our code later.
Yeah.
And she's like, what the, did you guys even talk to each other? Because this is a mess. Like, the children are out of control.
Yeah.
Like, somebody needs to organize the children. So the idea behind the container presentation pattern, architecture-wise, is that we can, when appropriate again, I'm not going to say it's always appropriate because it's not, but we can make it where the children just present. That's all they do. They don't know where the data is coming from. They don't know how to get the data. They just know how to talk to the boss, which would be the container, the parent.
Sure. So let me ask, there's a couple questions here. Yeah, President Not Sure says, would someone please think of the children? Yes. Yeah, that's good. Snoopaloopy, go ahead.
Real quick, go back to that comment. It's like, it's like going to the grocery store and you have those out of control kids, right? Where you're like, where is the mom or dad? Like, who is running these kids? Because they're just running wild throughout the grocery store. That's what you don't want in your application.
No. Snoopaloopy continues, when I hear container, my mind goes to Docker. That's a whole nother, right? That's a container above the container here that I think we're talking about.
Totally different topic. Yeah. Whoever made the container presentation pattern name, I actually don't know who created that name. Obviously probably didn't do a lot of Docker because there's a lot of confusion there. Yeah. Docker containers would be that would be what would be running this app, would be the Docker container.
For sure. Final question, comment here, and I want to get your feedback on this. Foffy Scrimshaw says, this is where the flux pattern would help. What's the flux pattern?
Yeah, so this goes back to kind of this Redux concept.
Okay.
And it's where everything has a single direction, which we call unidirectional data flow. This is exactly what we're doing. Where's data flowing to these? From the parent, down. And that's unidirectional, always down. That's better because Angular, React, Vue, if they know data always flows down, they don't have to always check. Like, Jeff, if you're the parent, I'm the child, if you change but your parent didn't, then if you change, well, Angular or React or Vue only has to check you and your children. It doesn't have to go up, 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 because data doesn't flow up like that. And that gets us into the Redux and all that,
If I were to write it here in the video, if I were to try and pour this out on the down below, no, kidding.
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. You're the parent and data flows down to me. And
then you can do something with it, make it appear properly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So another thing that comes up, you might notice, and this is going to change topics now, is this is another architecture thing to think about. And I'm going to offer that whoever asked the Vue question, by the way.
Yes, about the Vue architecture.
These concepts we're talking about right now, I want to emphasize they're not unique to Angular. React has this similar challenge of you could have a ton of children. Vue, you could have a ton of children. And how do you manage the children and things? How does state flow, like we just talked about? So another big thing that comes up is communication. What if when I click here, you're going to notice, see how this changed, John Doe?
Yeah.
I click Jane Doe.
Okay.
Michelle Thompson.
Right there above me.
So now we have data flowing over here. We have data flowing up here. And then watch as I push in a new customer. Watch the little red circle up here. See how it went to 4 and 5. Watch how responsive I am. Watch this, Jeff. Watch 10. Awesome.
Oh.
Phenomenal responsive design there. But anyway.
CSS for the win. Okay. All right.
Awesome. And here's what I say to anyone that complains. I take pull requests.
Yes. There you go.
So anyway, my point of this discussion is when you have data way down here, and this could get into the whole Flux Redux concept, but we're going to not go quite that deep in this next discussion.
Okay.
There are multiple communication techniques you can use. So React has several. Vue has several. Angular has several. From the Angular standpoint, they have a really cool library built in called Rxjs, Reactive Extensions for JavaScript.
Okay.
And in essence, you can think of it as if I have multiple pieces of data and I want to get it to you, then you would somehow have to observe the data, right? So think of if you're out in what, Philadelphia? You in Philadelphia?
Yes, it was Philadelphia, born and raised.
All right, nice.
Yeah.
Fresh Prince.
On the playground, I spend some of my days, chilling out, maxing, relaxing after school. No, anyways, yes, Philadelphia.
Just say that more with a beatbox. Anyway, for those who don't know, that's a funny comedy show. But
I'm not that old. Yes, I am. Okay,
well,
I am.
some of them might have missed it though. They're probably like not as old as we are, But imagine that we hooked up. I'm in Phoenix today.
Okay.
And Arizona. So imagine we hooked up a pipeline between me and you. And I start, I don't know, I have here's my props, I guess. So let's see. Yeah. So I got my iPod case here, AirPod case. I got my phone. Sorry, I'm not going to send you that one. I got my eyeglasses case. All right. So imagine this is the data. And I start dumping it into, let's see, where's the camera?
Up.
I start dumping it into the pipe.
Yeah.
Well, with promises, which a lot of folks that are listening probably have done promises, you listen for async data and you get it and you're done.
Sure.
What Rxjs does is provides this thing called observables, where it's like, all right, Jeff, I'm sending you the number 5 and you receive it. But you don't stop. I'm going to send you the number 20 and you receive it. And the number 50 and you receive it. So it's like a stream of data over time, and Rxjs makes that possible.
Okay. So I'm out there just listening and continuing to listen to see if there's more information that you're going to send to me.
Yeah, and because I know you've done a lot of .NET, it'd be like hooking up a delegate in .NET and C# to a method, a function,
Mm-hmm.
so that every time that event fires, you get the data, you get it. It's kind of like hooking up to a button click. With JavaScript, it'd be add event listener.
Okay.
Every time the buttons click, what happens? Well, your function gets called, right?
Trigger it. Yep.
Yeah, so you're kind of observing the click event. That's like a primitive way of doing it.
Okay.
Well, Rxjs provides way more than that, and we could have a whole multiple hours and hours on this, but they provide these things called subjects. And this is a thing that could be used in React, it could be used in Vue, it could be used in Angular. With Angular, Rxjs is a package dependency. So you kind of get it, you sort of have to have it in Angular.
Okay.
And what it offers is the ability to, I would be what's called the subject in this example. You would be the observer of the subject. Okay, so it's kind of the, you think of the observer pattern that you've probably heard of in coding.
Sure. I'm listening. I'm observing for any changes that may occur.
Exactly. So the idea here is that we can have different types of subjects. You'll see 4 here.
Okay.
A subject would be if you're hooked up, your pipeline in Philadelphia is hooked to all the way here to Arizona, we'll pretend, and that's already hooked up, and I dump in my AirPod case, you're going to get it because you're observing, right?
Sure.
But what happens if I sent my AirPod case and now let's just count to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now you subscribe? Well, you would have missed it.
Yeah.
Right? And now you're like bummed because you didn't get a free AirPods, even though they wouldn't have the AirPods because I'm using them.
But is there a way to go back and say, hey, tell me what happened over the last 5-10 seconds? Maybe I'm trying to catch up on what happened. Maybe there's a graceful shutdown that I'm trying to cover. Is there anything like that?
Exactly. Well, so subject is it'll send out to subscribers.
Okay.
So if you're subscribed, you're happy. If you're not subscribed, you're bummed. Behavior subject, if we did the scenario I just described with the AirPods, I would send the AirPods out to other listeners, but you didn't subscribe yet. But as soon as you subscribe, you would immediately get the last value, which would be the AirPod case in this example.
Okay.
Okay, so it replays, like you just said, you actually described it perfect, by the way. It replays the last value that was emitted out of the subject. That's a behavior.
And that was completely planned out there, chat room.
Now, replay subject, you could replay everything I've done. Let's say I've been sending out stuff for the last hour.
Yeah.
And then you subscribed an hour later. Well, you could replay everything that happened, almost like a history, like you said.
That might be a little much in some circumstances, I guess.
It is.
Yeah.
And you can control it. It turns out a behavior subject is actually under the covers a replay subject of 1. Replay just the last 1.
Okay.
Yeah. And then finally, async subject is I send, but you're like, I don't care, Dan. I don't care. But then I say, okay, I sent my last value. I'm done. And you're like, oh, that's the most fresh value. I want that. That's what async subject does. So let me run start here. What this does is it starts emitting values, but it has a timer where it's going to start these other ones later. So I'm going to start, calling subject service start, subscribing. Okay, we start emitting. Now watch over here on behavior. Now they subscribe 6 seconds later, but they still got the previous value. Now they'll get everything. Now replay subject just subscribed. It got everything.
Okay.
Now async subject, this subject just completed, so the last value was now sent out.
Okay.
Now you might wonder, okay, great, Dan, why would I care? Well, guess what you can do if I go back to here. So when I push in a new customer, here, this updated, right? So guess what I'm doing behind the scenes? I'm using subjects to talk between multiple levels of a tree of components. And so instead of having to bubble up data to you, Jeff, and you talk to your parent and they talk to theirs and up and up and up, that's a pretty fragile way to pass data up the tree. Instead, this component up here, which is like the header component, could subscribe to a subject. This could then emit to that subject. And now we're able to talk between different levels of the app.
Okay. All right. That makes sense to me.
Now that's in this, we just don't have time to cover everything, but that's kind of this communication section here.
Sure.
And then there's some core services. I'll show you really quick.
Mm-hmm.
This one shows, you would not try this at home, folks, because I'm embedding every single service. This is the demo I just ran.
It's a demo, yeah.
Okay, but it shows how you can send the next item right here to any subscribers. And then I also show like 4 different ways you could even clone the data. I'm doing a simple JSON stringify, JSON parse in this case, but this is one of those things in Angular that, and Vue and React, by the way, where people really struggle with, you're the parent, Jeff, and someone way deep in your hierarchy, your great, grandchild, emitted some data, and you're like, man, how do I get that data all the way up the tree to me? And what we could say rookies do, people that don't know better, is they'll bubble up, bubble up, bubble up, bubble up, and that's pretty fragile, obviously.
Sure. If something breaks in that chain, you're toast.
You're toast, exactly. Whereas with this, knowing this technique I'm not going to say it's going to change your life, Jeff, but it will make your life much better as a developer anyway.
I'm all about making my life better as a developer. So, all right, so this is a little bit with Rxjs. There's a question from ZSmart2 here in the chat room about the difference between Rxjs and View X. They're great for creating spaghetti code, says Fafi Scrimshaw. No, not spaghetti code. We don't want spaghetti code. That's the goal here. Spaghetti code.
In fact, if you do this right, it will definitely not be spaghetti code. It'll be very organized. So Vue X takes it another level up. Now, it's not Rxjs. Okay. Vue X is a state management solution for Vue. And what it does is if I want to send data all the way up the tree, instead of just communicating directly between me and you, Jeff, or me and somebody listening, what if instead we had a centralized store? Since I'm in Phoenix and you're in Philadelphia, let's say, I don't know, what's between us, Chicago maybe?
Dallas.
Or Dallas, there you go. Dallas would be more logical. Let's say that we agreed that any data we're going to exchange between ourselves, we're going to send that to Dallas, and they will store the data.
They do a clearinghouse or something, right?
Yeah, and then they'll ship it out to whoever wants it from Dallas. So I'll send the data to Dallas, and then you say, oh, I want that data, and then they'll magically ship it to you. Well, what Vuex would be, and this goes for Redux or NGRX, they're all very similar in what they do. Dallas would be the centralized store. So any state, we would call it, that we want to keep in the app for the lifetime of the app, we could put in the store, and then you could select from that store, you being in Philadelphia, the state that you want. Because if I send the state sometimes to Minnesota, sometimes to Florida, sometimes to Washington State, who wants to maintain that mess?
No.
Right? Whereas if you send state to Dallas and I send state to Dallas, we have a centralized store. And so what Vuex does is provides that store and a way to update the store and get data from the store and all kinds of other features.
Okay. That makes sense to me.
What we're talking about here is not that. This is just a raw communication technique that I want to talk between two things through this subject. So in this case, the subject is kind of the store, but I would call that a really primitive caveman store. So
that makes sense. Silent TV 22 just says, saw the title of the stream, had to stop in, moving to VueJS soon. Now, I mean, there's some really powerful things that, like you said, Angular comes with in the box. Why would you move from what would be a good reason to move from Angular to Vue? To say, you know what, we need to convert, we need to change frameworks and go to Vue.
Well, I think it depends on team skills, first off. As I mentioned, I think people that have a pretty solid framework background, I'm not going to say all of them because that's never true, but I generally find, and this is just speaking of from huge companies like Intel, JB Hunt, those side, Walmart, those type of companies, to teeny companies. If the skill set is there, they understand TypeScript well, they understand the framework. Personally, I don't have a reason to jump. I've built extremely large apps in Angular and extremely small apps in Angular, and they're great. Now, I think there is something to be said about simplicity, though. And I think Vue definitely provides the kind of, let's call it, core building blocks where I don't need every one of these saws in my tool shed. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I just need a few of them, and I'm happy with that. I think there is something to be said about that, and I think there's a lot of apps out there that they're not big enterprise apps that have like 100,000+ lines of code. There's a lot of apps that are just smaller apps that you might want to embed in a regular web app, for example. Well, we could do that with Vue. Would be a great thing for that. Could I build a big app with Vue? Absolutely. Sure. I honestly, I think it comes down to personal preference.
Yeah.
I hear people badmouth. I just had somebody that's switching off Vue, actually.
Wow.
Because their app got huge and they didn't like how Vue handled when your app gets huge.
Okay.
I've heard the opposite, where no, I love how Vue does it. And let's face it, developers, we never have opinions, right?
Never. So that kind of leads into the last question that I want to discuss with you. You've got a tremendous Visual Studio Code setup here. John was the same way. I want to ask you a similar question to what we asked him. What are some of the cool extensions that you're using in there that some of our folks in the chat room might want to pick up and use in their development going forward?
Yeah, that's a good wrap-up question, because I just realized, shoot, I got another meeting in like 2 minutes.
See that?
Gotta love it. No end. I have my own snippets, although I need to change the name to 8, but hasn't been a priority.
Okay.
I have my own snippets I use, but they're not priority. Angular console, this is a way to visually build Angular components and services and all that without using the command line.
Okay.
It's from a company called Narwhal. Pretty cool. If you're doing Angular language service is awesome because it gives you better code help in your HTML templates so that you get IntelliSense. Pretty nice. I use Azure, so pretty much all my Azure stuff in here is from the Azure tools because I'm a big Azure fan.
Okay.
Let's see what else. This is my laptop, so I don't actually have everything. I do .NET Core quite a bit, so I have the C#. Docker is awesome. If you're going to be doing Docker, you absolutely want the Docker extension. It makes it so easy to do Docker. I use these for my boards for some of the team members I work with. It's a free Git Kraken Glow. Some of you might have heard of Git Kraken. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's a board for your, whether it's Kanban or whatever you call that, however you do things to organize your sprints and things. It's pretty nice. This is a way, JSON to TS is a way to take JSON from like a RESTful service and convert it to TypeScript interfaces.
Yeah, there's a similar one that we've used on my stream to convert JSON to C# classes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is kind of similar thing. I'm a big fan of Kubernetes because I do a lot with Docker and containers, so I like the Kubernetes one also for Microsoft. There's LiveShare.
Everybody loves LiveShare.
To reload it. And then, aside from that, one of the coolest ones, if you do I have it on here? Oh, shoot, I don't have it on this machine. Yeah, remote containers is cool. Do I? No, that's remote containers. It's remote SSH. And if you ever have to SSH into a machine, go check out remote SSH. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. You actually can remote in, and then all the files that are on that remote server, you can work with as if they're local. It's freaking awesome. I think that's what it's called. It's from Microsoft, I think. Is it remote SSH? Yeah.
Open any folder on a remote machine using Shush and take advantage of VS codes. Nice.
Yeah, so if I do a lot with Linux, for example, so it's just awesome because I can go into my Linux boxes on Azure and just use this. Instead of having to do it all, through your favorite VI or whatever your command, tool is for editing, I just do it right here in VS Code now.
Very cool.
It's awesome. So, well, with that,
that brings us right to the end.
I unfortunately got to run now. I just realized I love talking with you. Sorry, I've been blabbing, but no, I appreciate talking.
Dan, we very much appreciate you spending the time with us and showing us a little bit of how you use Visual Studio Code, some of the architecture concepts in Angular. Thank you so much. If folks want to catch up with you, is there someplace you're on Twitter? You are Dan Wahlin on Twitter.
Yeah, at Dan, and nobody can spell my last name, but hey, good luck. It's Wahlin, Dan, Wahlin. So yeah, I'm on there a lot, actually, because I see Jeff on there a lot.
There you go. There's a link
John
in the chat room.
Is on there a lot.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you in November at the event.
We'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Alrighty.
Have a good one, Jeff.
Take care,
Catch
Dan.
you later.
There we go. So Dan is out. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. That was terrific. I really appreciate everybody tuning in today. So we got to talk to both John Papa and Dan Wahlin. They've got the 2 workshops that they're going to be hosting at the event in Las Vegas. I hope you get a chance to click through. There's links down below me here, information about the event. If you want to attend in person, if you want to check out those conference workshops, there's amazing sessions that they're going to be giving as well. The .NET team will be there with content, Visual Studio folks, Azure folks, AI folks. Make sure you click through and check it out if you'd like to join us for the event. And we'll be here interviewing some of those folks live on the Twitch channel. You're not going to be able to see all of the content that happens at the conference. You're not going to get an opportunity to meet and talk to some of those folks, but you will get a little bite-sized bit of the action as to what's going on. And of course, there'll be another event. If you can't make it to the one in November, there'll be another event coming up in the spring that we'll share more information about. Let me just check in with the chat room here with Dan Wahlin as presenter. Presenter.by says boom boom. Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Ancient Coder. I'm glad you folks enjoyed this. Ninja Ola, did I write the wrong link? Twitter.com/Dan. Oh, I did. Oh my gosh, I spelled it wrong. Yes. Thank you, Ancient Coder. That's the correct link. Let me paste that in. I had it backwards. I had the A and the H backwards. Thank you so much. Desert Griffin just got in, missed the whole thing. That's okay. The video will be available here, and we'll archive it, and it'll be available over on the DEVintersection website as well. Yeah, some guy named John says that he hears that John Papa is boring anyway. Who knew? Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you come back and join me next week. We're going to have another DEVintersection next week on the 24th. Let me just double check. I believe we're trying to get our friend Michelle Bustamante to join us next week to talk even more about architecture and a little bit about containers. She knows a thing or two about containers and Kubernetes. Really, very good expert. She's spoken at DockerCon a number of times. I hope you have a chance to join us next week. That'll be on Friday, it looks like. We'll be hosting that show. So do me a favor, click the follow button. It's right here, right above my head. Click that heart so that you can be notified when we're going to be scheduled for the next one coming up here. We're very excited to have Michelle join us right here. And of course, all the folks that you see here joining us here on the DEVintersection show will be at the event in Las Vegas in November. I want to make sure you know that you'll be able to talk to them live there if you'd like. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining me. That's about all the time I have for today. We'll be back, like I said, next week, and this video will be available on the DEVintersection website. If you missed any of it, of course, it's on the videos here on Twitch for about the next week or two. You'll be able to find it. All right, everybody, take care, and I'll see you next week.